if you leave a toxic relationship and you jump into a relationship right after, you go from experiencing toxicity and borderline abuse to starting to become toxic and the abuser in the relationship after.
Yeah.
So it can switch to the other way as well. That's why you need to be able to heal.
Welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye.
I'm Dr. Glenn.
This episode is about, 8 signs on when to know to call it quits. And we're specifically talking about romantic relationships. So when do you know that it's time to leave a romantic relationship? Before you get started, I just want to say what we were doing a second ago. I mean, we promised realism and transparency and just saying it like it is. So
Yes.
A second ago, I said, Glenn, we forgot to bring the alcohol on set, have a little drink. And
Yes.
what did you say?
I said I can't drink anymore because me and my wife are trying to make a baby. And
Yeah.
I did this.
Yeah.
I did this.
That's my favorite
Yeah.
part. Yeah. I can't drink anymore. And
can't.
I was like, why? He's like, the baby. And I was like,
The doctor was like, you need to cut your alcohol. I was like, okay.
so Glenn is aggressively making babies.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right.
Cool. On that note,
yeah.
let's just get into this. Does that bother you? Does that make you nervous? Should we cut that out?
That was an awkward transition, but you know what? It's cool. Leave it in. Leave it in. Let's be real.
Awkward transitions is what we do.
It's been common for a while, but it's okay.
All right. So look, when do you call it quits? And I think a lot of these things are going to be similar for friendships and any type of relationship, but I do think we should separate this out into different episodes. And this one specifically being focused on romantic relationships. So a marriage, a partnership,
Yes.
whatever it might be, but when do you call it quits? You had an obvious one. We'll start with number one, the most obvious.
If you're in an emotionally, physically abusive relationship, you need to go.
Yeah. The
Period.
weird part about that is the physically abusive is easier to recognize, obviously.
Sure.
But the emotionally abusive side, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, there's signs though. Once it starts weighing on your physical health, it's affecting your ability to function on a daily basis. Those are signs that it's time to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to give examples of emotional, physical abuse. Well, maybe just an example. We know physical abuse, but on the emotional side, what might be things you might hear in an emotionally abusive relationship?
Just threat, constant threats. You better not do this or else.
Oh, that's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really bad. Or you can't live without me, or you're so dumb, and just constantly being insulted. And then basically making the premise that, without that person, if they start making threats to you, like without me, your life is nothing. That's a sign that you need to go.
I'm fortunate to not have to have dealt with those kind of case studies and clients as of yet. But I know in social work, which is where you kind of cut your teeth, right?
Yeah.
That was a big thing.
It was very common. And then you had to deal with like adoptions and foster care and all that. So you had like a whole relationships that were extremely toxic, and you had kids as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's our obvious marker for it's time to go. Don't worry. The rest of these points are not nearly that obvious.
Yeah.
But let's go on to number 2, because I think all these sort of compound and relate. And one of the things that you said was the sort of emotional drain. So marker number 2 that I'm going to give is, when the cost, the emotional cost of maintaining the relationship is far greater than the benefit of the relationship, then you're kind of in a bad place. And I'm not speaking about the temporary storms that all relationships go through. I mean, consistently, there's a pattern of just always being drained.
Yeah. And so the cost is that you're constantly deteriorating mentally, emotionally, physically, to the point that you're losing your ability to function.
Yeah. And examples of this, because I feel like too often we don't equate the actual cost of an unhealthy relationship to real indicators. And it's important to understand that an unhealthy relationship with the person that you're closest to, of course, it's going to negatively affect your emotional health. It's going to affect your ability to be present. It's going to affect your ability to be able to spend time with your children and to actually be with them. It's going to affect your ability to focus at work, to focus at school, to do all these other tasks. That's the emotional side of that. But what was crazy to me was researchers at the University of Birmingham had actually showed that if you're in an unhealthy marriage, that you are more likely to catch flu-like viruses.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's compromising your immune system and your health.
That was mind-blowing to me. And they put a number on it. They said you're 35% more likely to get sick. And when you do get sick, it's going to be more severe. Because I was in that exact place. In fact, when I read that statistic, I was in the middle of an unhealthy marriage and I was constantly getting sick. The crazy part was, despite reading it and knowing what was going on, I still denied it.
Yeah. Because, because I think you got used to it. You know, the analogy of the frog.
Yeah.
You throw a frog in hot water, it jumps out because it knows that it's hot. But you put it in cold water and slowly boil, it gets used to the heat.
Yeah.
And eventually it dies, right? So you're just used to that heat at a certain point, but it was compromising your overall well-being.
Well, I was getting sick probably once every other week. It wouldn't be like major, flus and stuff like that. That would happen several times a year. But I would have a cold almost constantly, like every other week. I was not sleeping well. I was constantly lethargic, tired. And I would, drink more caffeine and I would do more, whatever I got to do to like compensate for this. And I read that statistic and I thought, no, I just have a not so great immune system. And when I separated, it stopped instantly. It was like, as soon as I moved out from that environment, I stopped getting sick.
Yeah. And then you weren't living that dichotomous lifestyle anymore because you were able to function healthily away from the home, right?
Yeah.
And then you had to go back to this crazy space, right? So it's just this one extreme to the other. How could your health not be compromised?
Yeah. It's wild from a logical standpoint to like look back at it and to think that. But in the midst of it, you're kind of, I don't know what else to say other than just kind of had my head buried in the sand. The other side of that cost too, the emotional aspect, right? So I don't feel like it's the weirdest thing. And I want to relate all these stories to our audience. Like whenever I can't find, we have plenty of client and case studies that we can bring into these, but I feel like if I do have the experience personally, it means a little more sharing it from that experience, which is why I want to be very transparent about this. But I have pictures. I think when I separated, I moved out when my oldest was 6. So at that time, I had tons of pictures of me with the kids. And I look back at these photographs now, right? They're on my phone, they're on my computer. And I can't remember a single memory of those photographs. Like I can see myself in the photo. I'm holding my son. I'm doing something with my daughter. But I don't remember what we were doing beyond the context of the photograph. And I don't remember that moment. I don't remember that time of my life outside of simply the marital issues. I remember all those. And that was insane to me because now being on the flip side, being, close to 4 or 5 years into a healthy relationship, I look back at our pictures and I remember every single memory. I was there. I was present. So that cost was massive.
Yeah. And ultimately you were numbing yourself, right? You were in such a traumatized state that you're displacing yourself and separating yourself mentally and emotionally.
Yeah. So these are some of the signs and the indicators of being in a relationship where the emotional cost is far outweighed, compared to its benefits. These are the things that you kind of notice, that you feel, that you're not present, that you're frequently distracted, that you're getting sick often, that your emotional energy, you're always drained, you're, can't function at work, you have difficulty mind at task and all of it.
Well, the other thing too is I think it's redefining what healthy is, right? So like during that time, you said 14 years in that marriage, right? A lot of people would say you were resilient and you were coping well during the 14 years, right? And then you kind of had a break where you're like, I had enough and I can't handle this anymore, right? So a lot of people would look at that experience and be like, that's unhealthy that you had this break, right? On the flip side, if you look at it from a different lens, you were really to cope with it and to handle it that long. That was the unhealthiest that you ever were. And once you had that break moment, which people can observe and say like, ooh, you're not being healthy, that was you becoming healthy because you can't tolerate it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the bottom line with all of this is once you no longer tolerate toxicity in your life, that is the break of healthiness. And that's what you'll do once you have that moment like, man, I can't even stomach this anymore. That's a sign of health and it's time to move on.
Yeah. The crazy part about that transition is that those that are in this situation, if you are suddenly becoming aware of the toxicity and wanting to make changes, you're going to be labeled as the person that has the problems.
Exactly.
Because the people around you are going to want to maintain status quo.
Yeah.
And you have to really protect your kind of sanity because you will feel gaslit by all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I always tell people that when they're in toxic relationships, man, once they break, they're like, oh, I'm having a breakdown. I'm getting so depressed.
Yeah.
You're becoming healthy.
Yeah.
You can't tolerate this anymore. This is a sign that it's time for you to go.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
One of, and we'll talk about this one in just a minute. We're going to kind of move through point by point.
Yeah.
And that was number 2 is kind of that energy and always being in that state of drained, you know, like no emotional energy, no physical energy. And you can see those physical outward signs, you know, you're in a bad place. So number 3, which goes to this thing that you just said, was being happier alone. You know,
Yeah.
why don't you go into that for 1 second, and then I'm going to share.
Just there's a sense of relief when you're not in that relationship or that person is gone for a little while.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I can relax.
Because you gave the analogy that sometimes you can leave the relationship and you might perceive it as being unhealthy because you're distraught about it, right? You want the,
Yeah.
it's almost like you're conditioned to the toxicity, the drama,
Yeah.
and you crave it. But there's a flip side to that, which is instant relief.
And a calm and just like, wow, this feels good. There's motivation that comes back
Yeah.
naturally,
Yeah.
right? You have all these emotions that are coming.
And that was my experience. So from my perspective, I think I had probably mourned the loss of my relationship a decade prior to it actually ending. So when it ended, all I felt was relief. In fact, that was my main thing was I felt like there's only one good reason to leave a relationship, and that is you would be happier and healthier alone. I don't think, for those listening that maybe you're considering leaving a relationship because there's someone or something better. I don't think that's a thing because I don't think you're in a place mentally where you can even know what that is and let alone be able to judge it in someone else. What I think you're seeing is, the 5 or 10% thing that you're missing, or maybe it's 50% of whatever you're missing, but I think that's all you're seeing when you're trying to make that judgment call from within a really toxic environment.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and the statistics back that up, something insane, like 99% of affair-based relationships end. Like they don't go because what you can't perceive the other person correctly in that state.
Yeah.
So in my mind, there's only one good reason to leave, and that is that you're going to be happier and healthier alone. And when I made that decision, the first decision was, let's just separate. I just need to see if I stop getting sick, if I feel better, and it was day one. I didn't miss my ex, and I thought maybe in a month I'm going to miss my ex. Didn't happen. I thought maybe in 2 months, maybe when I get sick for the very first time, I'll miss my ex. Maybe when I have something catastrophic happen. It was funny. I would put these ideas into the universe, and for some reason they would get answered. Like I said, what if I get sick? And then suddenly I've got the flu and I'm out for a week and I'm alone in an apartment and I'm fine. I'm happy. I'm healthy. When I see my kids, I'm fine. I'm good. I want to be with them. And I want to be present with them. And now every time I spend time with them, I'm happy. And I get to plan activities and be the dad. And then if something catastrophic happens, I tear my Achilles, followed by almost dying from needing an emergency gallbladder removal.
Oh, man.
Like all consecutive things.
Yeah.
And each time it happened, no, I'm good. There's not one moment where I miss that life, where I want that back. And that to me was a very clear indicator of like, that was super toxic and that was very unhealthy. And now this is something much better. So being happier alone and healthier alone.
Yeah, and that would have been the time that you would have, craved that relationship back when you were like sick, almost dying, like, oh, I wish this person was here.
That's what I thought. I thought
Yeah.
maybe when I'm in
Yeah.
those desperate moments, I'll want it back.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't the case.
And you bring up another good point is it's good to do it because you just want to be alone. You want to figure
Yes.
yourself out because on the flip side, if you leave a toxic relationship and you jump into a relationship right after, you go from experiencing toxicity and borderline abuse to starting to become toxic and the abuser in the relationship after.
Yeah.
So it can switch to the other way as well. That's
That-
why you need to be able to heal.
That's a very interesting note, because the next person that I had dated after that process, and it was a very short-term relationship,
Yeah.
I think that was very much her experience, was that I was the one doing things that were, and I was very clear, I'm not in like a great place. I'm not looking for anything serious. And she was okay with it and bought off on all of it, despite multiple kind of like warnings and whatnot.
Yeah.
But when it came down to it, what she wanted was not what she was saying. And so me not being emotionally present and there for her basically flipped the dynamic. It was like, and I could see it in her behavior, because this person was once a friend, and all of a sudden the way that she was responding and reacting to me was as if I was doing something. I'm like, I'm not actually doing anything. I'm just not getting into the relationship the way that you might want, or maybe that you expect, or maybe I've led you on, or whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it was crazy. And I cut it off within 2 weeks because I recognized what I was doing. I was like, I'm not only hurting you, I'm destroying the friendship that was there, So I cut it off and just took more time, like figure things out.
Yeah, which is really smart to do.
Well, or you torch your relationship. But it's interesting how that dynamic can flip so quickly.
It can flip. So yeah, if you don't heal first, then you're going to play it out because it's still unresolved. That's a very common thing, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I have here number 4. This was one of yours. So these are all, again, road signs to when to know you're in a toxic relationship, right? When you know that it's time to kind of leave. Your 4th one was constantly anxious.
Yeah. So usually in this dynamic, you're constantly nervous and you're not even thinking about yourself. You're just constantly thinking about what the other person wants. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome, right? Like you're so consumed with thinking what they're thinking and trying to understand their processes that you've completely shut down your ability to be your own person.
Well, you have that one too.
Yeah.
You have it as number 4 is constantly anxious. Number 5 was always putting your needs aside to focus on theirs. Right?
Yeah, they go hand in hand. They go hand in hand because you're constantly thinking about the other person more than yourself. There is no balance whatsoever.
Yeah. On the constantly anxious, I had an example case study where basically one person was only concerned with the end of the relationship and was completely unwilling to work on the relationship unless they were guaranteed the relationship would work. That was a very interesting thing to me, because this woman, we'll give her a name. We'll call her Tina. Tina was constantly anxious about everything that her husband felt, that, he's going to end the relationship, that it's not going to work, that, so it was so much in her mind that it took 100% of her energy. And in my thought, it's kind of like, Tina, there's no way to guarantee, there's no way to actually give you what you want. Nobody can guarantee that, right? That it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And for you to say that I'm only going to work on it when I know this anxiousness can be removed is actually only going to kind of speed up the demise, because you're not going to do the work and then it is going to end.
You bring up a good point. So it could go two ways, right? So if you're in a toxic relationship, and then you're afraid of your partner, you can be anxious that way, right? In this example, it could possibly be, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that she had issues herself that she didn't resolve. And so she was constantly anxious in this relationship. So she needed to not be in a relationship.
For sure. But they were married. So like,
oh, okay.
But yes, you're right that her trauma, her past issues that she was bringing into it was this sense of insecurity. It was that anxious attachment style where she's kind of, she needs validation. She doesn't have worth in her own eyes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help the fact that he's the breadwinner and she doesn't have, because in her mind, she's like, I wish I had a job. I wish I was providing. I wish I was working. So the way that she had built up her values of what she, appreciates, she herself wasn't living up to it.
Yeah.
So in her mind, it's just a matter of time before he leaves, because that's the way, because he should. Like, so that is a core trauma that needed to be addressed 1000%.
But even realistically, like the way her lifestyle was set up, she was so dependent upon him, even financially, mentally, emotionally, that it could break at any moment.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
yeah, there's that one's an interesting one. So the other side of this then was the always putting your needs aside to, for the other person. And that could be for a variety of reasons, maybe to avoid fighting, maybe to avoid issues, to avoid argument, whatever it might be. Maybe just because you're that giver and you're a people pleaser and you just do it on your own.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think on one extreme, if it's a toxic or borderline abuse or an abusive relationship and you're doing that, that's a sign to go, right? But on the flip side, on the other end, if you have issues that you need to work out and you're bringing that to the relationship, maybe you need to pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have examples of like putting your own needs aside to just focus on what the other person wants in a relationship? How does that come to life?
So I had, so there's like a couple examples where like, two clients, they were very successful in life. So they were really like driven in business, very assertive. But due to their like relationship history, like how they grew up, their father was not around. In relationships, they became very anxious and dependent. And then so they would be bossy at work. So they would go on one extreme. They're leading teams and they're creating all these, incredible businesses. But then at home, they'd be so nervous to make a decision.
Interesting.
And then they'd be like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And then they try to push themselves into becoming this kind of like stereotypical female that they thought that they were supposed to be. And a lot of that came from like trauma issues and abandonment issues that took place. So they're playing it out. And that's what I mean, like it's dichotomous. So they had this one lifestyle where they're, at an emotional distance, because work, friendship is this emotional distance. They're able to function in a healthy way. And then once they became intimate, those pains, they're so strong and healthy. They have so many resources. They could choose anybody else, but they choose these partners that push them into this rigid hole where they become really anxious. They give up their independence, and they're just in pain constantly.
Yeah. I've seen that play out a lot in the anxious kind of avoidant sort of relationship, right? So to define this, the anxious person, like we're describing, is the person that wants constant validation, and the avoidant person is the one that's usually more narcissistic and more kind of like, well, I separate, I do my own thing when I want to do my own thing. In conflict, I spend time away and figure my own stuff out, and I'll come back and, whatever. So I see this played out a lot where the person on the anxious side is the one that is basically doing everything on behalf of the other person, and the other person's receiving only. And so you have this one-way kind of relationship where one person's feeding the other, one person gives, the other person takes. The way that I see this, so that's the one of the signs for me is if one person's constantly giving and the other person is constantly taking without regard, without showing, appreciativeness from that, that's a problem. The way that it should kind of work is if you have two people that are highly driven, let's say personally, to do positive things for the other person. They put their own needs aside for the other person. Then you see it being a two-way street. So I might give up my own wants to serve my spouse, but my spouse also gives up her own for me. And it kind of balances out, because where I say, do you need me to stay home and do this? She says, no, you need to go and do this because you need your, and I do the same thing. Honey, you need to get out and get some personal time. And this is, so there should be that kind of healthy balance between looking out for each other's, needs and wants in the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're pointing out, like, it's fair to say that whether you're at home, whether you're at work, whether you're hanging out with friends, you don't change yourself too much. Is that an accurate statement?
For sure. You don't want to, right?
Yeah, you're just kind of who you are because all the intimacy levels in your life, you're comfortable. You're living your truth, right?
But that also comes with time and your own development. Because you remember back in high school, we all tried to be people that, I mean, I did. Even in college, I was trying to be someone that I wasn't.
Yeah. No, for sure, because you're just trying to figure yourself out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, once you figure yourself out, like it doesn't matter the different areas of your life, you're not changing or you're not veering too much as of a person.
Correct.
Like you're staying who you are. Like the example I gave, like more specifically, this person was a doctor or is a doctor. Her life is very successful, but at home, it's very chaotic. And it's because in her most intimate levels, she still has stuff to work out. And so, given this example, she should leave, but she doesn't because she still has stuff to work out.
Interesting.
Yeah. And people, at a distance, like, why can't you just leave? Why can't you do that? Because she still has things to work out. So it goes from extremely successful, organized, and then on the other flip side at home, extremely chaotic and hopeless.
Yeah. And that could be for a number of reasons. People, I've seen a lot of situations where couples are in a hyper-toxic relationship, but then the personal trauma kind of shows itself in the way that they talk about it. Yeah, it's difficult, but I can't be by myself. It's difficult, but there's no way I could provide this kind of lifestyle for me. It's difficult, but he's trying. It's difficult, but, and so you hear the past trauma work itself up and like, or it's not the ideal marriage, but I just can't think of anybody that wants to be with me. So
yeah,
I'm just grateful that he loves me.
Yeah. Someone here cares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 6, we have conversations that regularly go towards criticism. So you're basically trying to just discuss everyday things and you can't get through anything because each conversation goes towards an argument, criticism, something.
Yeah. There's no middle ground. There's no compromise. It just becomes like self-preservation and whoever can argue the best wins.
Yeah. I'm going to bring up, along with this one, not only conversations going towards criticism, but there's what we've kind of defined within core value focused therapy is this lack of regard. And that's kind of what you see with this topic, right? Conversations that go towards negativity, towards critique, towards, or even just like scoffing at something someone says, right?
Yeah.
Even just being dismissive, for example. But all of it is a sign that points to a lack of regard. In Gottman's terminology, it would be contempt. In our terminology, it's regard because we tie regard to attraction. It's difficult to be attracted to anybody, friend, someone romantically, anything. It's difficult to want a relationship when you lack the fundamental respect for that person. And that's what regard is. It's that combination of respect and admiration and love and the things that make you want the relationship. But when someone's dismissive or when conversations constantly go towards that direction, regard has been damaged, if not completely removed. And you can see it very clearly. Like, this was one of the things I can see very easily from the perspective of a photographer, right? The couple standing next to me, I say, let's go and do something. We're going to go on the beach and we're going to shoot. And he's kind of looking at the sunset and he's like, honey, look at how beautiful this is. And she's like, yeah, that's nice. But is my necklace okay? Like, is this like, this look good? Does this look good? And he's like, honey, just come back, be present for a minute. And she's like, I got it. It's fine. Or flip it around and she points out something and he kind of scoffs and he's like, yeah, that's just what she does. She's just, what do you guys do for, I had this situation where I asked, what do you do for a living? And he goes, jokingly, she spends my money. And I was like, it's said as a joke, but I know personally that there is a loss of regard there and that there's truth to what he's saying. And you can see the damage in the respect that's already there. And she kind of had this like awkward face for a second and then we went back to the shoot. Those are all signs of this, lack of regard, this conversations going toward this place, dismissive behavior, that type of stuff, which is a big red flag.
Yeah. And then it's a spectrum. Like, that's more of a low level spectrum. And then on the other end, if if the partner is constantly criticizing you, I forgot who the author is, but they talked about like emotionally abusive relationships.
Yeah.
That is a starting point to abuse.
Yeah.
Every time you're getting dismissed and criticized, it's going in that direction of abuse.
Starts out really small with these like,
These little slights.
not paying attention, being dismissive, making half jokes, that kind of stuff, moves its way into, why aren't you this? Why can't you this?
What's wrong with you? You're stupid.
Yeah.
You're an effing idiot, blah, 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 blah.
I haven't heard those, which is nuts to me. That I know on the side of social work, you've seen a lot of crazy stuff, but
that's another podcast.
That's another episode. Yeah. The 10 craziest stories that Glenn has. Actually, we might need one episode for each story. All right. I'm going to go to number 7. We have basically being criticized for being independent. Now, what do you feel like separates this from general criticism?
So just in general, like if you're in a toxic environment or a toxic relationship, for example, like if you're in a toxic environment and then you're seeking to do better for yourself, the group will go into what's known as groupthink. They'll attack the person and say, you're stupid and you're dumb for doing this, because they're leaving the group. And then it fuses the group together to remain toxic. And then this person becomes a target of all of their vitriol and anger because they're breaking away from the group. Same thing in toxic relationships, right? So once a person feels like they're losing control, and then this person is trying to become more independent, they're becoming healthier, they're going to go on the attack and they're going to go after this person.
And that's the place where you're going to feel gaslit. That's the place where you're going to be told that you're crazy, that why, this isn't that big of a deal. Why can't you, I don't get why you're destroying something that's so great.
Right.
It's all the words that would make you feel like your logic and line of reasoning to doing something healthy and beneficial for yourself is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And throughout this whole process, I think it's redefining what a healthy person in a relationship is. And bottom line, if you're a healthy person, the people that are closest to you in your life, you're going to treat them the best. Right. And then from there, like outwardly, like the less intimate it is, it trickles outwardly. Right. On the flip side, if you're an unhealthy person, you treat the people in your life that are closest to you the worst, but then you treat people at emotional distances, you treat them really, really well.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. That's why you'll see people like they have like these crazy family lives, but then they give money away to strangers and they'll do all these nice things. Unless there's a decent person in there. Yes, but they're also toxic because they're doing that for people at emotional distances. But when it's required to do it in a more intimate space, they can't.
I mean, it's completely flip-flopped.
It's flip-flopped.
And the crazy thing is that there's a lot of sayings and cliche statements that we use to back up that behavior as being healthy. Like family does shitty things to each other. Oh, you hurt the people you're closest to.
Yeah.
Like how many sayings do we have that kind of support this flip-flop dynamic of how it should actually be?
Yeah. And then the greater the pain, because it's more intimate, the more work is required. And that's where you need to start and do your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe one of the things that we can kind of, again, bringing all these points back to one place is that at the end of the day, the relationship with this person, the person that you are closest to, it should yield, I want to use a business term, synergy. It should be synergistic, right? Both people should be getting more emotionally and from an energy and from a health standpoint out of the relationship than they would by themselves or without the other person.
Yeah.
Both people should have that.
Absolutely, because it's promoting independency, it's promoting growth.
Yes.
And it feels good. Bottom line, it feels good.
Yeah. So when you have, on the flip side, when you have a relationship that's either consistently one-sided in that kind of energy and benefit exchange, or where both people are being drained, then you have something that's toxic. And I use that term carefully, toxic, because I feel like too often we're labeling things as toxic when in reality people are just having a fight. You're just having a storm.
Yeah.
It's not toxic. It's just this is normal.
Yeah.
You have to go through that. But toxicity would be when there's a consistent, repeated pattern, when the ongoing emotional bank account is always negative.
Yeah, and it's just not a good space to be in.
Yeah.
Period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's it for us. Unless Anthony, did we cover all of our bases here? I think we did. This topic was actually Anthony's suggestion. So wanted to make sure that we covered the bases here. But when to know when to actually step away from a romantic relationship. That's a really important thing. And hopefully this podcast, this episode, gave everybody some ideas on like some road signs just to kind of figure out, okay, what's normal, what's past the point of normal, and what is way beyond, and should I be considering kind of moving past?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So those that are listening, we would obviously love for you to subscribe to the podcast. You can find 12-Week Relationships on Spotify, on iTunes. We're on YouTube if you want to watch. And in the meantime, if you guys need support, we have an entire 12-week program for couples. You guys get to meet one-on-one with Dr. Glenn, and you can sign up for that at 12weekrelationships.com. We have a free 15-minute consult where Glenn is going to walk you through exactly what he's going to do for you guys and show you everything. And that's it for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you guys next time.